Hey everyone, Livy here, back with another video, and today you will be seeing my July 2025 monthly musings. This is where I talk about life, books that I read, and tarot and oracle related things. And I feel like July has a lot to talk about, but I'll try to be kind of succinct. So first off, to kind of get us in the mood of talking about life here, I'm going to show you guys basically what my card of the month was for July, which I just realized you can't see some of this anyways, but it's, you know what, it's fine. If you can't tell already by some of these images, July, my card of the month for July was the Six of Pentacles, which in some ways, I don't know about you guys, sometimes it's like, okay, yes, I understand I need to be generous, I need to be kind, I need to give back to others, give back my time, my energy, whatever it is. But sometimes you just don't want to have to do that. I know that I personally didn't want to have to do this as much, but you know, I tried to go about it the best I could. So there are some things like that I did do in the month of July, and I'll try to be brief. I think the biggest thing for July was that I ate a lot of good food. I hung out with a lot of friends during the month. My husband Daryl returned from being out of town. We did some day trips around California to just some usual haunts, like places like Pacifica, Burlingame, Los Altos, like some beachy stuff, Sunnyvale, like just things, right? We were just doing things. We were going out and about when he came back more. And they're not even big things. It's just like kind of strolling around town and maybe either having a lunch or not having lunch, you know, or just hanging out in a coffee shop, working and doing things. So it's not like, you know, big things. But anyways, so part of July was that. I did go on one bigger trip during the month of July. If I remember, I always say that, but if I remember, I will put pictures here. If I don't, I'm so sorry. But in July, we did like a day trip, or not like an overnight, I mean, to this place called Fort Bragg, which is in more northern part of California. And I have to say, even though I was really excited to go there and it was really cool to like explore and see a bunch of things, we really shouldn't have done an overnight thing because, for reference, from where I live to get to Fort Bragg, we had to drive about 4 hours and something north of us to get there. And that was insanity because you have to think, if you're doing it an overnight, right? You did that the first way to get there, and then you have to do the same thing the next day, right? So it was very chaotic, very stressful in that way. Even though it was really fun to be there, it was very beautiful and stuff. It was very much a long journey, especially back home, because even if you stop once, right, your journey doesn't actually take 4.5 hours, right? Because if you stop to eat and say you spend at least an hour or like even 30 minutes, it somehow ends up being longer than that, right? You end up, your journey there and back ends up being like 5 hours or 6 hours, depending on, like, again, how long you stop for, if you were looking at any sites when you stopped, things like that. So yeah, overall, it was just a very, very long journey. Beautiful though, because like if you haven't ever been to Fort Bragg, it's just a really beautiful area along the coast. It's a small town, but they have some sites like the skunk train, which Daryl and I did, which was very cool. And they also have this thing called Glass Beach, which I recommend like going to. And Glass Beach is basically just a beach where, I don't know if it's because of the way the tide comes in or something, it makes it that basically you can find little bits of sea glass everywhere. Nowadays, I don't know about in the past, but nowadays it's so popular, I guess, that the only shards of sea glass you're going to find are like little baby pebbles. I do actually have some, but I forgot where I put it. And maybe I'll like remember and show that next time. I did get a little handful, but like there were people who were literally trying to go around the beach with like a whole bag to do this, but they probably shouldn't have done that. I don't know. But anyways, is what it is. But that was fun. So I guess in the month of July, I just spent a lot of time trying to be generous with my time with other people. Especially because then I had to go back to work at the end of the month, and that sucked. I did not want to have to go back. Funny enough, my work did acknowledge that I had been at my work now for 5 years, and so they gave a little like award thing, and then I guess I'm getting some kind of bonus or stipend thingy. From what I understand, it won't come until the end of August, but yeah, so they acknowledged that I've been in my work for 5 years, and that also happened that I had to go back. And then my birthday, okay, my birthday was in the month of July, but to be honest with you all, I really didn't do much this year. I already had gone back to work by then, and the weekend before was the whole Fort Bragg thing, so I was burnt out and tired, and I just spent most of the day relaxing. So I might do a little birthday haul video thing, but I'm again debating. I don't know. I'll think about it. But anyways, it's been about 6 minutes of this video, so we're gonna move on. I'm gonna clear out this, and then we're gonna talk about books because I read a whopping 7 books, and I'll try to be quick with all that. Okay, so the first book, or books, I guess that you could say, I read during the month of July was this one. This is like too close to see, but basically this book is called A Ruinous Fate by Kaylee Smith. A fun fact about her, I was supposed to do an anthology thing with her, and then it didn't pan out, but that's fine. It is what it is. Anyways, this book, okay, A Ruinous Fate, did prompt me to read the second book later in the month. So this is A Reckless Oath is what this one is called. And overall, after reading both of these, I have to say I feel kind of mid about them. Let me explain. So basically, this book, I would say, was a solid 3-star for me. And this book, I would say, kind of dipped into being 2 stars. And I'll try to quickly explain why. So if you don't know, this is a book, at least it has a description on the back, thank God. It's basically a fantasy world where every magical creature type that you can imagine somehow lives in the same world, but there's this like god destiny tied thing relating to, I don't know if you guys can see in here, but relating to dice. Okay, so this is one of the characters, Kala. She's the main character of like this book. And okay, this is why I had to rate this book 3. There's this big overall plot where they talk about how these dice, like every witch has to roll a dice, basically. But not even just one. They have to roll a total of, I think it's like 5 or 6 dice, something like that. And apparently, depending on what number you get, that determines your fate or whatever. But people who keep rolling the same number continuously are, I guess, slated to become these like almost like godlike figures that are going to go towards this war. Okay, so that's the whole premise. She's one of them because she keeps rolling 6s. And so they're like, you're going to be a blood warrior, bad blood warrior. We don't want those. And it's this whole like silly thing. And she's a witch, technically. She has magic and all this stuff. I think where this book and this book, like the whole series as a whole, kind of started going down for me is the fact that normally I love multi-POV books. But this series is done in a way where the multi-POV doesn't really make sense in that it's not picking the priority of who is actually the main character, because there are some things that are kind of wild. So in the first book, I'd say it probably focused more on Kala, like actually talking about the fact that she's slated to become the next blood warrior, and that's like an issue. But by the second book here, okay, this is one of the other main characters. Delphine, I think is her name. She's a siren. So that's what I mean. It's like, it's a world where like witches exist, but sirens exist, but Valkyries exist, but fairies exist. It's like all in the same, world, and they each have their own realms. You would think based on the cover that this book was supposed to be about Delphine, okay? But she ended up taking a backseat in this book for some stupid reason, because her plotline was only a very small sliver of all the like multi-POV people in it. I feel like this book, for some reason, focused a lot on this random Valkyrie character more than what should have been like the focus on them, if that makes sense. So that's why this had to go way below, because I can just tell too. I think my problem with this series, I could tell the author wasn't writing cohesively, in the sense that she was just trying to rev up for another book. She was just trying to rev this book up to get to this book, and revving this book up to get to the next book. But none of these books followed, I think, a clear, cohesive arc that made sense. So that's why. Anyways, we're going to move on to the next book here. Okay, I'm not going to spend too long talking about this book, but this is, as you can see, Star Wars: The High Republic, and specifically, this is the book Light of the Jedi. I read this book also in the month of July. I gave this book a 3-star also. I feel like for this book, okay, I love Star Wars. Let me preface by saying that. I love Star Wars. I love the idea that this is placed in a time where it was like the Jedi Golden Age, okay? I think what also did this book a disservice, like the last series I was just talking about, is that this book also had a lot of multi-POVs. But the thing about Star Wars is it's always like that, right? There is always multi-POV stuff going on. But because you didn't know any of the characters like before this was established, like basically this book had to establish who all these Jedis were, because this is set like at least 100 to 200 or even 300 plus years before the events of episode 1, 2, and 3, that you had to establish who all these people were. And so it was kind of chaotic, especially because visually you can't see it. Like Star Wars benefits from having a lot of visuals. So as a novel, it was a little bit harder to get through in that way, but it did ramp up and become very interesting towards the end of this book. But overall, because there was just like kind of a slog to get through in the beginning, I rated this just a 3. I don't know if I will continue reading these novelizations of Star Wars. If I do, I feel like they will probably just be library books. I'm not going to pick up another one to buy. But let's now move on. Another book that I read during the month of July. I'm not going to talk about this too long either. This is called The Power of Moments by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. To be very clear, I had to read this book for work. That was it. For some reason, they gave us summer reading. It was very kind of weird, but we haven't even talked about this book yet. So in some ways, I feel like I kind of wasted my time. Overall, I guess I would give this book a 2, because really it's just talking about basically what the title says, the power of moments. Like, oh, you got to make every moment count, and here's some ways you can do it. But it's definitely aimed at people who are businesses or like work, like schools or other things, about like how they can bring moments that will make people feel joy and all that stuff. But the way it was done was just very, I don't know how to explain it except to say that like a lot of them are like kind of no shit moments, like no shit Sherlock. But I also didn't like that it felt like this book, that the reason why I think my work gave us this book is kind of guilt trippy, of like, ooh, you got to make every moment count with students. And it's like, dude, we already have to do so much as it is. You really want us to focus anymore? So yeah, wasn't the greatest, but I had to read this for work. So, it goes kind of as the book that I read. Another book that I read during the month of July is this one. This was actually the last book I read. There's 2 other books I'm going to talk about, but I will talk about this one briefly. This one is called Win Among Crows, and as you can see, it is by Veronica Roth. I believe she's the same author as the Divergent series. To be transparent, never read Divergent. It was not my cup of tea when I heard about its plot and some of the weird stuff going on in that book. But Win Among Crows, I think, is adult. It's like an adult novella. That's the vibes I got, because they're all adults, like the characters in here. And as you can see, it is a novella. It's very small. And it's based off of Polish mythology and stuff like that, which I will be honest, I was not familiar with. So there was a lot of terms kind of thrown in here that I kind of had to learn. They were explained enough, but like to get a sense of it. So that was good. It was at least explained. But at first I was just kind of struggling to figure out what was going on here. I think I would also rate this a 3 because while it was interesting more towards the end, I did like too that this book included at least male like love interests and stuff. Oh, I should say the other book series, what was it, A Ruinous Fate and A Reckless Oath, those were good because every character in there was bi, so that was a plus for that book. But anyways, for this one, just male. And that was nice, but again, I feel like I kind of was left wanting a little more, which I guess is always kind of an issue you can end up with in novellas if it's not done all the way. So yeah, anyways, this is 3. But I'm going to now turn to the books that were my favorites of the month, and then we'll move on from there into tarot and oracle. Okay, next up here, we have the 2 books that I would consider my favorites of the month of July, and they are by obviously the same author because this is a duology. This is Kika Hatzopoulou, Greek ancestry, and this book is called Threads That Bind, that's the first one, and Hearts That Cut, which is the second. I would say that I was very much a fan of these. These books felt like they were catered to me, because if you can't tell, it's based a bit on Greek mythology, but not just any Greek mythology. It's not like the big hero-esque things that you would think. If you can't tell by the cover of this one, Threads That Bind, the main character here is one of the 3 fates, or basically in this world, that's basically our world, but it's like a dystopian-ish future set like well in advance. Like we don't know the year or anything like that, but it's like a time where the world has succumbed to a lot of natural disasters, and now people live in these city-states that are all clumped together, and then there's wastelands in between. And people have to traverse that, and it's very dangerous. There's a lot of chimerini and all these like creatures that are there. But this main character, she is pretty badass, I would say, because it's about, so it says that there's 3 sisters, but Io is this character, Io. She's the youngest, and she's the cutter. So basically in this world, there's a bunch of like descendants of gods essentially, and they have magic from them, but they don't even talk about the big gods. It's more of like in terms of smaller gods that help set the world. So obviously she's a descendant of the fates, like, you know, the threads of fate. So she's a cutter, so she's the one who can cut threads and stuff like that. She has 2 older sisters, one that weaves the threads and one that stretches the thread. But this main character, Io, she is the cutter, and she is also a detective, which was really cool. And she had to solve this case where people's life threads are basically being cut prematurely, and it's turning them into wraiths. So it was really cool. It kind of, basically, I think the reason why this book ended up being a 5-star for me, and this one pretty much also kind of being a 5, but more like 4.5, I would say, is because it combined a couple genres, right? There's the idea of like fantasy, dystopian-ish stuff. It has some magic, but it's like hard-boiled detective at the same time. So it was just really cool in that way. I really liked the world building personally. I liked the pace of her like her and her love interest, kind of. It's very slow burnish though, so if you're someone who likes things hard and fast, you probably would not like the series. Technically, this book is supposed to be, I think it technically falls under YA, but it doesn't read that way to me. Or like, because the main character I think is at least already 18, and she talks about it's like having a job and, you know, having to do all these like crazy things to try to figure out the mystery and the conspiracy going on in this world with like whoever's cutting these threads, and the fact that there's like a prophecy she later learns about how she might be the one to end the world. So that's like what kind of continues in this. And there's just a lot of really cool stuff in here. I do recommend these if you like Greek mythology or like the idea of like getting more. But yeah, it doesn't really, I don't know. It's technically labeled YA. I didn't read it as such. It read more like a new adult maybe, but not like with as heavy of romance, because sometimes for some reason new adult gets labeled with a lot of romance. It's just very slow burn romance, but I liked how it came out. I did see that some people didn't like the way that this book ended because it is kind of abrupt. I will say it is a little bit. Some things were wrapped up, but it's not fully wrapped up with every character. So if you like every character to have an arc wrapped up in a nice little bow, that's why this kind of went down a little bit, but otherwise I still think these were both good. These are my favorites, and now because this video is so long, we are going to move into decks. Okay, we're going to start with the oracles. These are oracle decks that I used during the month of July. We have here the Wild Unknown Pocket Animal Spirit. I know, can you believe I have this one? Kim's Crayons. And then I also this month slated these two, so the Deck of Emblems and the Citadel Oracle. I showed these two recently in a video. I won't really spend very long on them. I have what is known as a special edition that lasted, I guess, only a short period of time. If you want to know what I'm talking about, I did a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 decks video where I kind of talked recently about like what came to light about Liminal 11. So I'm not going to get into that right now. But these are the backs and the edges of the special edition. The Deck of Emblems you could have only gotten if it was the special edition, but I don't even know if they're selling that anymore. These are the backs, fronts. I like this deck overall, like both of these decks overall. But what's funny is that during the month of July this year compared to last year, I didn't use these two decks as much. Also because I feel like I sometimes use them in conjunction with other things, but these were not the decks I used the most. For Oracle, in terms of Oracle, it was actually the Pocket Wild Animal Spirit. But I'm just showing you guys a couple of things so you get the vibe of this. Basically, these are both fantasy-based oracles, limited color palette, copper tones in them. The Deck of Emblems talks more about items, and then so basically the helm, and then it gives you some keywords, whereas the actual Citadel is more in archetypes of people. So we have the brawler, and then you have their keywords attached. So yeah, they function a little bit differently, but they're almost the same. You can almost overlap them, that kind of thing. So yeah, I use these a little bit during the month of July, but I didn't use them as much as I had the year before. Again, I think it's because, I don't know what it was. I think this year I noticed I tend to gravitate towards decks that I feel like I hadn't given myself a fair chance to read with before. Because you're going to see, I'm going to talk about the tarot, and there's a lot of favorites in the collection that I actually, slated to use this month. But I didn't use them nearly as much as others. But let's talk now about this deck. Can you believe? Okay, this is the Wild Unknown Pocket Animal Spirit. I use this deck actually a lot more than I thought I would during the month of July. It comes with, so even the mini, right, comes with this big iBook with a lot of dense text, as you can see. So it still gives you the same amount as if you buy the full version, essentially. A lot of dense text, a lot of animals, all that jazz. It still has the same information. It's just in a smaller format. I know not everyone would like this though, because again, if you are harder of seeing, this is a little harder. For me, it's fine. I just kind of have to look at it. But as you can see from far away, it is very small. But it does show the images and all that stuff. But that's the guidebook. I think the size of this, though, is so perfect for small hands. See, I can like easily hold it and all that stuff. Cardstock. The backs are just okay. I don't know. Don't feel any kind of way about them. But the cardstock's kind of nice. It's like a smooth, matte kind of thing. Has a good bend. Very flexible. So, again, easy to work with. Easy to carry around because it's in a tin. And I actually ended up using this deck quite a bit in the month of July. And part of that was just because it's easy to carry around, and it actually goes pretty good with the next deck I guess I'm going to show. But I use this deck quite a bit. I even did, do I have time to show it? Some of these cards you just saw were from that. But I even did, maybe I'll show it. I think it's, oh wait, no, is it in here? This is my tarot journal, sorry. Oh, no, it's not. Okay. Oh, but I did do a spread like this. So as you can see, I paired this deck with the Zodiac Tarot, which I'm going to talk a little bit more. It goes really good with it, actually. But I use this deck to do a birthday spread, basically, where it has it in this guidebook, where you take like 13 cards and basically figure out like an animal energy that you should focus on during the month of whatever it is. So I basically did from July to June. So like July of this year all the way to June of next year before my birthday month comes again. And then it has like an overall month. So that was fun. That was interesting. It gave me a lot of insights. I need to actually put it in my tarot journal though. I just took a photo of it and then haven't put that in there yet. But this is a deck that is honestly very unexpected. You guys know this isn't really my style. I'm not totally a fan of Kim Cran's artwork. I don't like a lot of black and white. But somehow this deck works for me. I think it's because last year someone in my tarot group had this deck and they were like, use it to do a birthday reading for yourself. And then I actually liked that. And so again, this was very specific of a purchase, but it worked, and I was surprised by how easy it was to use because, again, it's in a tin. It's very fun. And then, of course, it went really well with this deck. I already put this one away, so I'm not going to show that again. But let's talk about this deck. You guys know this deck. I feel like I've talked about it a lot. This is the Zodiac Tarot. This is the version from US Games that's in a tin. There is a full-size version of this deck, but it kind of has the same problems that this deck has in that it's the same exact cardstock, which, as if you guys can't tell, because you can see the reflection here, it is very high gloss. And unfortunately, it is the type of high gloss where this deck is very sticky and we'll see fingerprints. So this is not a cardstock for everybody. To be honest, this is the thing about this deck that I hate the most, is the fact that the cardstock is awful. I don't know why they went with that choice, but it's also the same cardstock in the big size, so it is what it is at this point. Now, what's funny about the Zodiac Tarot, though, I used it once again this year. I think I used it last year in July too. Is this deck ended up being the tarot deck, I should say, that I used the most during the month of July. And again, it's like with terrible cardstock, you would think, like, why would that be the case? Why would I use this deck so much? And again, I don't know what it is, but I really like this deck despite its nasty cardstock. I'm pretty sure it's the artwork for me. I love decks that have not white space, but black space instead. like the dead space or whatever they call it. I like the way that things are drawn, and the colors that are chosen, I think, makes this deck very interesting to me. I like this tin version because it's very easy to take around, to basically be my travel deck for the month. So it happened to be that I was doing the most readings from this one because this is the only pocket tarot I had assigned for this month. So again, and it's mass market, so you can just kind of like throw it around and it's kind of fine if it gets thrown around and beaten up and all that jazz. So this ended up being the deck I used the most, which again, find out very funny and interesting. I even took it to Tarot Group again because it's easy. So they saw it again. They're like, oh, hey, I remember that deck. I'm like, yeah. Because again, it's just the most convenient because of its size. Again, if you have smaller hands, like US Games tins are honestly the best. And I like too that even though they're smaller, they're still a good size. Like you can take these anywhere and basically do like a bigger reading, and it's not going to be a problem. You could put like a lot of cards and it's not an issue. Like it won't take up as much table space as a regular size tarot. So for that reason, that's why it ended up being the deck I used the most, which is again interesting in that way, but is what it is. But yeah, Zodiac Tarot. This is the deck that, despite everything, I somehow like. But we're going to have some interesting ones in August that I think there's a couple of tins in there too. So it'll be interesting to see what ends up being the most represented. But Zodiac Tarot definitely was. Next up, let's see what else I used. In this little bag, I have... This is the Dungeons and Dragons Tarot. Another mass market. I edged it myself in black. Does not come that way. And these are the backs. The cardstock is interesting. It's like, I've talked about this before. You guys can see the texture there. I call this like a pseudo linen because I can tell based on how thick it is. It's not fully linen, but it's got like a pseudo linen-ish texture. You can also tell that the edges are more sharp, which is interesting, but I still love this deck. And as you know, or as you might not know, this deck is based on Dungeons and Dragons. The artwork in this deck is stunning, and the suits have been renamed. So wisdom, it aligns with D&D, but wisdom is for the cups, intelligence is for the swords. The regular are still the same. Charisma is for the pentacles, and I wanted to see if I found any. It doesn't. Strength is for the wands, which is interesting. I've said this once. I think I'll say it again. My only gripe with this deck is I think strength and charisma should have been switched in terms of like what elemental alignments and stuff like that. But anyways, I still love this deck. But funny enough, I did not use this deck very much. In fact, I think I only used this deck once. I wanted to actually use this deck more during the month of July. It just didn't pan out. I think it's also because, again, I was using the Zodiac Tarot more. And another deck I'm going to show that I probably use. The other two I kind of used a lot too. Of ones I'm going to show. So this took a back seat, but the interesting thing is I have used this deck a lot in the past. I've done readings for others with this deck, so it's not like I just don't like this deck. I just felt like in comparison to other decks I picked for the month of July, this one ended up taking a back seat just because, again, I wanted to use other decks more, or I happened to use other decks more. But yeah, that is Dungeons and Dragons Tarot. Let me see, what else do I want to talk about here? Oh, I guess I'll talk about this deck next, only because I also didn't use it very much, if at all. The Eldrich Overload. You guys know about this deck. I've talked about this deck also a lot besides Dungeons and Dragons. This is another one based on Dungeons and Dragons, except it is cyberpunk fantasy. But these are the holographic backs that are really cool. This deck has a lot of color. As I said, it's also cyberpunk. And that's also the other funny thing is that I also only use this deck once. And I think that's fair because this deck and the Dungeons and Dragons are up there in some of my favorite decks that I have in my whole collection, right? So it makes sense that I wouldn't always want to use these in comparison to some of the other decks I got that still feel a little bit newer. So I only use this for one actual reading, but I still love this deck. It's just, it wasn't its time, you know, I wasn't in the mood. And sometimes you just simply aren't. And I have so many decks now that if I don't show the same love and attention I have in the past with this deck, then I will never really build relationships with them. So it makes sense. But yeah, I didn't use this one as much. Sorry, I'm adding like the extra cards back in. But yeah, this is Eldrich Overload. I've talked about this deck a lot. You've seen it a lot on my channel, I think, if you come here a lot. But yeah, but I also did not use that one as much. Now, the next deck is also a favorite of mine. Right here. This is the Spark and Pen Tarot. Indie deck. Eldritch Overload was also indie, but all the other decks I've shown so far are mass market. But this is an indie. You can get this one on Etsy. These are the backs. Very beautiful. I love, 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 love the linen texture of this deck because this is an actual linen and it bends really well and it's just a really, really good deck. You guys already know this is one of my favorites, and as such I did use this deck a little bit. I tried not to use it as much because I always, you guys know, I'm obsessed with this deck, so I tried not to use it a crazy ton, but I ended up using this deck for at least a couple of readings, and I even read for other people with this deck during the month of July. Just some friends, right? I did a reading for them. And this deck was very accurate and helpful, and it did its job, right? Because that's what it does. Very beautiful deck. Kind of has a little more nudity, so just warning on that if you're someone who doesn't like nudity as much like me. I don't know what it is about this deck. I think it's just the way that it's drawn that I'm not completely bought. Oh, I hate this card. That's the only card I don't like. Anyways. The way it's drawn, I think, is the only reason why I'm not as bothered by the nudity in this one, but normally not a fan. But other than that, I love the art style. I love the color choices. It's a very straight to the point deck, but it's very easy to read in that way. So yeah, Spark and Pen. I do recommend this one. And very easy to shuffle because it is linen, like actual linen, right? So very easy to use. So I use this deck quite a bit, not as much again as the Zodiac Tarot, but I used it a good deal. And then finally, the last deck that I used during the month of July happens to be this one, which, yeah, see, same mat. It came with the Kickstarter, okay? This deck is Windbell Island. Recent Kickstarter this year, and I decided to work my way into using it in July. These are the backs of this deck. I am obsessed. They are so cool, so beautiful. This deck is also a linen finish. It's like a Woe Studios kind of linen, really easy to use, very bendy, smooth texture. I just love their cardstock. It's really good. But anyways, this deck is, as you can see, very, very beautiful also in terms of color. Like, it does really interesting things with color, and I find this deck a very interesting character study deck. I feel like every card has a very interesting figure in it. That could be turned almost like into a story. It's very, very cool, in my opinion. And I use this deck a bit, not gonna lie, because I was really into it. I use this for at least 3 or 4 readings. Like, I did a week ahead reading with this. I did its tarot interview, and then I feel like there was something else I did. But I can't remember now. I don't remember now. But I really enjoyed this deck. It had really interesting messaging for me, especially in its interview. So I'm excited to use this again. I don't know when I will use this again because, again, I'm doing this thing this year, if you guys don't know, where I am trying to be more intentional, sorry, about all the decks that I use. So I literally have a schedule. And I worked this deck into July, but for the rest of the year, you know, I have different decks I'm going to use, but maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll use this for something else. But in the meantime, its journey for this year is done, but I love it. It was a really cool purchase. Again, through the Kickstarter, I even got this cool mat out of it. And it's a fun one. I'm very excited to use this in the future. But anyways, that is it. That was a lot longer than I thought it would be, but that is it. I think it's because I had so many books I had to talk about. But those were all the decks I used in the month of July, and that was my month of July. So if you were watching this long, thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. I do try to go in the comments as much as I can. I have been more intentional about like not always being chronically online though. So if it takes me longer to reply back, sorry, but I do love and appreciate all of you. And I will see you again next time. Bye.